For too long, DEI has been co-opted, twisted, it's been mangled, and really made into something that it's not. And I really want to lead the charge in helping us all unlearn these harmful concepts and best practices and things that I like to refer to as activities that have really dominated the world of DEI. Today, really, I want to talk about a concept that I think we can do without in the world of DEI. And I know that this is going to step on some toes. I know that this is going to perhaps be controversial, but I want to talk about the concept of allies. Before we get started, my name is Demetria Miles McDonald, and let's unlearn. So what is an ally? And there's a lot of definitions of what it means to be an ally. And when I think of an ally, I think of it as a person who really uses their privilege to challenge the world around them on behalf of someone else. But let's dig in a little bit deeper there, because I think the concept of an ally really goes back in time. I mean, we can trace that concept back to slavery and this is just one example of when white people would open up their homes to serve as a safe space on the Underground Railroad. So think about it. There's an enslaved person who might be running away from their plantation, and there's a home that a white person lives in, and it's been designated as a safe space, maybe for the enslaved person to rest, to get food, to get water, before they're then directed to the next place that's a safe space on the Underground Railroad. I also think about the allies during the Civil Rights Movement. The ones who would participate and lead, activities or participate in marches or things like that. And that would put a target on their back. And in both of these, examples, for white people to participate in these activities really meant life or death. And if they were caught, then they would lose their life, just like the Black person who would be caught in situations like this. There was really a lot on the line, and for that, I think they've earned the title of an ally. If we were to fast forward to now, and I think about the word ally, how it's become really popular in the world of DEI, and the application of it has been very prominent in the workplace. I think we're at a point now where ally has been diluted and watered down so much from its original intent. And I truly believe that we've gone from a point where being an ally, or the concept of allyship, it's gone from being helpful to being harmful. And I think that there are three reasons why, in my mind, we don't need this concept of allyship anymore. Or if we are going to have this concept of allyship, I'm going to raise the bar again for what that means in the context of what it's meant in the past. So here are my three reasons why I just don't know if we need the concept of ally anymore. One, I think that allyship is performative. I think allies today are praised for doing the bare minimum. For example, I did a lot of research to prepare for this. And as I was reading through articles, I was reading through, what are people doing? Because there was a lot of fluff pieces about what it means to be an ally and things like that. But I wanted to understand what are they talking about? What's the nitty gritty? And when I found those articles, actually what I found was a lot of trainings on how to be an ally. And I'm going to come back to this because I think it's very weird. But I found a lot that talked about allies mentoring or sponsoring someone from a marginalized community. And when I saw that, I was like, but it's probably someone who deserved to be mentored and sponsored anyway, and they just weren't for whatever reason. But then as I was looking more into these training programs that were meant to teach mostly men, mostly white men, how to be allies, I saw that they were targeting leaders, male leaders, men in leadership positions. And my question became, if men who are leaders are the target for this program and they are in positions of power, why are they being trained on allyship instead of being challenged to change the system? We have men who are in leadership positions who, instead of thinking about and strategizing on how to change the system, they're going through trainings to learn how to be an ally. And I thought that was one, it said a lot about our value within the DEI world on activities that might get us there versus those strategies that are productive that definitely get us there. So then I started thinking, okay, how does this differ from allies from the past? And so I started thinking, historically, during slavery or Jim Crow, allies didn't typically hold systemic power. They were usually outsiders. They weren't in positions of power, and they were often risking their safety to do what was right. But today's allies, especially the ones that were being targeted in those trainings, they're leading companies, they're leading departments, they're leading teams. I mean, they are the system. They are the ones who are creating and maintaining these laws and rules and policies and norms. I mean, they are the ones who can change the system. I remember I was doing some training, and after the training was over, I had a man come up to me and was telling me how, the session, he learned a lot, but he said, I feel really powerless to do anything. Like, I just don't know what to do. And as we were engaging in conversation, I asked him, what do you do? What company are you with? And all of those things. And during the course of that conversation, he told me that he was the vice president of his company. And I thought to myself, wait, you're the vice president of your company and you're telling me that you are powerless? Like, I just couldn't help but wonder, I mean, if they don't think that they are capable of changing the system, why should I have faith in them to be allies? So that when I say that allyship is performative, he felt comfortable saying, I'm powerless. There's nothing that I can do. I guarantee you he would have been one of the first people to sign up for this allyship program. And I understand the intent. I really do. The intent is to make the world better for marginalized groups and for everyone. And I can respect that. What I think that there's an opportunity to do better is in the solution. Because when I think about, does this actually solve the problem? It doesn't. And I don't know that allyship was ever meant to solve the problem, but there are a lot of people who are in positions who can solve the problem, who instead of solving the problem, they're calling themselves an ally. And I think that's where the problem is. And so I said earlier that if we are going to have an ally, then we've got to take the standard back to its original point in time. The standards have been lowered. So I think about, during slavery and Jim Crow, there were sacrifices. There was a risk that made allyship really worthy of its own category. And that level of sacrifice and risk meant a lot. And I just don't know that it's the same in workplaces today. Because if you think about it, most of our workplaces, there's rarely any risk that's required. If someone were to sponsor or mentor a woman or person of color or, whatever, there's not a whole lot of risk involved in that. So, would I equate that to the risk that folks were taking back in slavery or Jim Crow times? Absolutely not. I think where there might be some risk today, if we were to think about that through today's lens, let's say ICE shows up to your workplace and they're trying to take away folks, who look like they might be immigrants. That to me is when putting your body on the line, raising your voice, having folks hear you and stepping up and saying, no, this isn't right. Then that might be where I might call someone an ally. But these trainings aren't teaching folks to do that. There's not training, these allyship trainings, these articles that on allyship, that they're not asking people to do that. And the things that are being asked of these allies is very low risk. It's safe. And when I think about what actually results in the world we want, safe is not something that comes top of mind for me. So outside of these, very obvious examples of when being an ally is important, and I'm talking about Jim Crow, slavery, ICE, I don't know that allies are needed in most cases, especially when I think about my experience in the workplace. there weren't many times where I needed an ally. Most of the time, marginalized groups don't need allies. There's two things. One, it's that we need folks to just be decent human beings. And in the event that folks are not decent human beings, we need people who will say something. And I don't know that the folks who are saying something deserve a label. I don't know if you're going to speak up because you heard someone talking over me, if that act deserves a label, or if it's just like, hey, thank you for being a nice person. Thank you for being considerate. Thank you for being kind. Because, again, the bar has been lowered to a point that some of these bare minimum activities and things that we require to just be good people are now allies. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is, many times when I think about folks who are calling themselves allies, they're getting in the way. And sometimes we just need them to get out of the way. Sometimes allies unintentionally, because again, I know the intent is to make the world better, but unintentionally get in the way. And here's what I think about all the time when I think about allies. So it reminds me of my drive home. During my drive home, the entrance into my neighborhood is off of a really busy 4-lane road. And oftentimes, one of the lanes will back up significantly more than the other lane. And every time there's someone who will stop their car in the one lane so that I presumably can then turn into my neighborhood. But I have 2 lanes to cross. And so I can't necessarily see what's happening in that second lane that I also need to cross to get into my neighborhood. And most of the time, I can't see what's happening because when the first car stops, the cars behind it stop, and it's blocking my view of that second lane. I can't see what cars are coming. I can't see anything that's happening. And even when the car that stopped kind of waves me through and they're like, come on, you've got it. I can't trust that. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but I watch too many of those dash cam videos where I see folks and they'll be like, the coast is clear, go ahead. And someone will turn, and then the next thing you know, they're getting hit T-boned because, they couldn't see the car that was coming, and a car was in fact coming, but they relied on the person who said, come on through, you're good to go. And so I know I need to see it for myself. And it's not that I don't trust the person who's telling me to come through, but at the same time, I got to see it. I need to see it for myself. So sometimes, even though that person has really great intent, I know that they're just trying to be helpful. They are not being helpful. They're making the situation more difficult. And sometimes, instead of them stopping and backing up traffic even more, I just need them to go. I just need them to keep going on through so that after all the cars get through, then I can see what's happening and I can go. And I think about that all the time because when I think about today's version of allies, what they are doing sometimes is harmful. It is harmful to the point where it's just like, get out of the way. Bless your heart, but get out of the way. Bless your heart, but get out of the way. Okay, so that's point number 1. I think that it is performative. Number 2, I think allyship has really turned into another type of saviorism. I think allyship has turned into another type of saviorism. And saviorism is often referred to as white saviorism. Is when a person with privilege believes that they can save someone from a marginalized group. And I often think of people who go on these mission trips to different parts of the world with, mostly brown or black communities. And they believe that they're doing really good by providing food or water or medicine. And then they provide their form of religion. And these missionaries often believe that they're saving the people in these communities because, they need to know God in the same way that I know God. And really, it's a form of assimilation and threatens to erase just their entire culture. And I don't know that allyship is saviorism reincarnated, but it's too close for comfort. It's too close for comfort. I believe that the people who call themselves allies are seeing themselves as saviors, who come in, who are going to be the protectors. They're going to save the day in some way, shape, or form. But what is most concerning to me about this is that I think allyship creates and maintains this hierarchy of power. I once was talking with a colleague, and it was a white woman, and she had recently heard me talk about intersectionality and the table of diversity. And one of the things she came to me with and she was talking about was, I'd never really thought about intersectionality and privilege and marginalization. And she said that was really an eye-opener for me. And then she said, because I, as a white woman, have power over you. And what she meant was, as a white woman, she has more privilege and power than perhaps I do as a black woman. But she said, I have power over you. And I thought to myself, I didn't say that. Like that was not my message. But that's what she heard. And that has stuck with me. So it has been years. It's been at least 5 years since this happened. And I thought to myself, this is dangerous because there's this hierarchy. There's this power dynamic that's created when people talk about allies, when they see themselves as allies. And I think that that's dangerous. I think it's dangerous because it's not true, because allyship says that people of color will always need a white person, that women will always need a man, that people who are part of the LGBTQIA plus community will always need a cisgender heterosexual person, that, people who are disabled will always need an able-bodied person. I truly believe that allyship perpetuates this power dynamic that is harmful. And when you pair that with the fact that allies really aren't risking anything, that they're not doing anything to change the system in a major way, it is not productive, it is not helpful, and it is absolutely harmful. See, that one you got to sit with for a little bit. That one you've got to let sit on your brain, sit on your soul for a little bit, because it's like, man, that's deep. I mean, I said that. I thought that, and it's still deep to me. So that's powerful. And the third reason is very much a follow-up to the first and second. Privilege, people do not only experience privilege. No one just experiences privilege, just like no one just experiences marginalization. Well, I won't say no one, but the chances of someone just experiencing privilege or just experiencing marginalization, it's very small. Most people who are in the workplace are going to be a combination of both privileged and marginalized identities. And the experiences that we have are just dependent on the rooms we walk into. What I thought about after the white woman said to me, I have power over you. She was a couple of decades older than me. And so one of the things that I had thought about in that moment was, but maybe I have privilege over you because I'm younger than you. And we all know about age discrimination, right? So when I think about privilege and marginalization, I think about it through the lens of the table of diversity. I think about it through the various ways that we see ourselves and we see each other, and how it's not just race, it's not just gender identity or sexual orientation. There's so much to who we are and how we show up and who we are. One of the really humbling things that can come out of these conversations about unlearning, and the more I think about it, the more I'm like, gosh, there's so many layers to this, so many layers, because we are all fighting this system. And if we are all fighting this system, and I look at someone who is in a position of privilege, and I see them and I think, gosh, you may be doing better than me, but it's just a little bit. You might be doing just a little bit better than me. So how, if your privilege hasn't helped you more than it's helped you, how do you think your privilege is going to help me? I mean, either I must be doing pretty good if I don't have privilege compared to a lot of these folks that we're looking at that do have privilege. That can be humbling. But then I also think about, the allies of slavery and Jim Crow, and even the ones today I've seen videos of folks who stand up to ICE when they, go to workplaces or they're going into communities. Those folks deserve a title. Those are the people who we need to know who they are. We need to designate them a special title because of the risk that they're taking. If someone is just speaking up on behalf of me because they saw something bad happening to me, for instance, they're speaking up in a meeting because someone was speaking over me, that doesn't deserve a title. It does not deserve a special title, because what do we call the people who are marginalized who are also speaking up? Right? We have a special title for people who are privileged and speaking up. What's the title that we give people who are marginalized and speaking up? If I'm speaking up on my own behalf, someone is interrupting me and I say, "Excuse me, I'm still speaking." What is that title that I then have? Am I an ally to myself or what? Like we've elevated folks to a position by giving them a title that perhaps it's not warranted, it's not needed. And as I said in point 2, it continues this dynamic, it continues this hierarchy of power. And I believe it's doing more harm than good. So what replaces it? If we're not talking about allyship anymore, if there are no more allyship trainings, then what? And I'm not saying that there should not be allyship trainings, but I think we need to get back to the standard that we were at before, where you're an ally if ICE comes into your neighborhood or comes into your workplace and is trying to take folks away. Like, now you're an ally in that situation. You're not an ally if you decide to sponsor or mentor someone who is deserving of sponsorship or mentorship. Like, at the very least, you might be a leader, but you're not necessarily an ally, because that's the bare minimum. That's the bare minimum. And it's okay for that to be the bare minimum. And it's okay for that not to receive special titles and things like that. I mean, I think we need to raise the bar a little bit. So what do we call it? Perhaps it's being in community with one another. Perhaps it is being cordial, being a basic, decent human being. I mean, if I saw someone who was being berated on the street and I stepped in, I don't know that I deserve a title of being an ally. I might not even know this person. I might not know that they are part of a marginalized community. I might not know any of that. But if I see something that's just not right, then I'm going to step in. And I would hope that most people would do that. And if they're not, well, then that makes me question. If they're not a basic, decent human being, then why are they deserving of a spot in your organization? So I think we need to raise the standard of what it means to be an ally. It's not doing the basics. It's not doing the bare minimum. It's going really above and beyond. I mean, the risk is high. For anything else, it's just being a good person. So this is an opportunity, and I hope that you sit with these things. I mean, even as I say it, and I've said it a lot because I've rehearsed this, I've written it pen to paper, I've typed it out, I've said it multiple times as I was preparing for this. I still have to sit with some of these things for a minute because it's a lot. It's a lot to unpack. It's a lot to try to unlearn and to take apart and to try to put it back together again. And one of the things that I think is really important is, and this is something that I have experienced for about 10 years, for about as long as I've had the table of diversity. One of the things that I have always said is that employee resource groups are not sustainable. And every time I say that, every time I tell a leader or an organization that employee resource groups are not sustainable, they always ask, what do we replace it with? What do we do instead? And sometimes the answer is to just do the work. You don't have to create a special place for the work. You don't have to put guardrails on the work. The expectation is that everyone do the work. And when I think about allies, we are elevating and putting guardrails around something that should just be normalized in our organizations. This is something that should just be part of the culture. It should just be part of who we are and how we operate. And we reward people who are, decent human beings, who show up and are considerate of those around them. We hold people accountable when they're not. We hold people accountable when they're not doing the things that we would expect for them to do as just a basic human being. And I think we have to get back to that, where it's a requirement of our organization to just be a good person. And if you're not going to be a good person and recognize and take into consideration the people around you in a very basic way. And I keep going back to the example of, speaking over someone in a meeting, because I hear that a lot. I hear, that I saw it as an example in a lot of the research that I did for this particular video. If that's the bare minimum, is, we expect for people to speak up if you hear someone talking over someone else in a meeting. That's the bare minimum. The bar is here. Let's raise the bar so that where the risk is higher. And I know risk is depends on the person. But at the same time, when we look at the risk, especially compared to slavery and Jim Crow, it's not a risk. It may be slightly uncomfortable, but it's not a risk. And I think if we are going to categorize a group of people, if we're going to provide training, if we're going to provide resources, people, if we're going to put forth all of this effort and energy into something, then it's got to attack the root cause. And allyship does not. It's a Band-Aid. It does not look at the root cause. One article that I read, it was talking to some men who had gone through a particular allyship training program. It was one man who said he went through it and, went back to his organization the next day, saw that there were a group of women. And he went up to the group of women and said, "Ladies, I'm an ally. Tell me what you need me to do." And he said the looks that these women gave him, he said they were so dismissive of him that he couldn't understand it. And that let me know that the allyship training that he went through was not good. It was not good. It did not teach him, even in our modern day example or how-to guide, it did not teach him how to be an ally. Because that let me know, which I don't even think was the intent, but it let me know that he didn't learn anything. That if he thought he could go up to a group of women and say, "All right, I'm an ally. What do you need me to do?" and think that was going to solve the problem, then he missed the lesson. It went over his head. And so all the investment that was made into him failed. And quite frankly, I don't know. They didn't list his position within the organization, but if he had a position of power, I guarantee if he went through a training that perhaps taught him how to think strategically about the work and to look at his work through a DEI lens, he would have walked away and not needed to go up to the women and say, "What do you need me to do?" But he'd have some idea of what he could do. And when he needed to bring in the women into his world and say, "Okay, here's what I can't do. I know y'all can do it. Let me know your thoughts." But that's not how it went. And so I think that there is a huge opportunity to refocus a lot of this allyship conversation and energy into something that I would think is much more productive. And I would love to see that happen. I would love to see us de-emphasize allyship, especially when we don't have a name for folks who are marginalized, who are standing up for their own rights and standing up in their own spaces. There's no word for that. And that really worries me. And I have a friend who has helped me be much more aware and intentional of the words and the concepts and the constructs that we're using to describe things, because there's a lot of meaning behind it. And one example that she uses to really help highlight this, there's been a lot of words to describe marginalized and oppressed people over the years. And one word that kind of came up and rose to the top was underserved. It's come up recently. It's been utilized quite a bit. And one day we were talking and she said, "I don't know about that word underserved, because who's doing the underserving?" And I thought my mind was blown, because I'm thinking, you're absolutely right. We're talking about people being underserved as if it's this unseen, unknown kind of entity doing this to a group of people. But we know who's doing it. So why don't they have a label? What are we calling them? Are they the underservers? So I think we just have to be very cautious in the words that we're using, the labels that we're giving, and the meaning behind them, especially if we're going to create entire programs to get people to become allies. There has to be more there than what's currently there. And I think that most folks would be better served not to become modern day allies, unless we're talking about the ICE situation, right? The bar is higher. But to really understand the systems that so many people have the opportunity to change, but might not know how, and think that's where we need to spend our time. So I say all of this to say that there's a lot for us to unlearn. There's a lot for us to undo. And I hope that this is just the beginning of an opportunity to dive in to some of these concepts and say, if we were to do it all over again, would we still have this? And my vote on allyship is no. But let me know your thoughts. Let me know in the comments what you think. And stay tuned, because I have a lot more that I want to talk about and that I want us to unlearn. And in some instances, it's unlearning so that we can replace it with something better. Then in many instances, it's unlearning so that we can just do the work. Again, my name is Demetria Miles McDonald, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.